Hi everyone, my division has now released an assessment framework and I want to give some tips to those who are wanting to give online exams. The video will use Google Forms, but the planning and setup of the exam transfers to many other online platforms. The first thing to address is why you need to give a traditional exam online. Is it because you are concerned about the authenticity of student understanding? Is it because you feel more confident in the grade you give if it's linked to an exam? Is it because it feels normal? Start with some of these questions because sometimes our first response isn't the best response to a new situation. This is an opportunity to question how we know what we know in the context of assessment. That's an IB theory of knowledge-like question. Another area of concern is to not use your secure exams already created. Even if you work hard at securing these exams, once something is on the internet, assume that it is recorded, screen captured, photoed, and is freely available. In the future, this exam could be a good review for your future students, so the process isn't a complete waste. Also, be thoughtful that students should not be punished for not participating in the exam. There are so many other factors right now that may be preventing a student from wanting to complete an exam. Therefore, the exam can be communicated more as a marks booster than an end-all be-all for a student's grade. With all of that preamble, if you have soul-searched and decided that online exams are still the best method of evaluating students, here are 5 tips to avoid some heartache when using online exams. The time codes are on the screen and in the description below. Before we begin, I use Google Forms for multiple choice and numeric exams in the traditional school setting anyways. Many teachers ask how I ensure the authenticity of these exams, but I find students in the classroom behave responsibly as long as I'm constantly roaming the room. There are some additional challenges and strategies that I will share to help mitigate unwanted behavior. Check the description and I may even have a Google form that you can copy with all of these tips built in. Now, tip number 1, begin with the end in mind. This tip is about designing your exam so that it is easier to manage the marking and grading. If you are using Gradebook as the grade recording software, include a question for students to input their student ID. Then you can export the grades from Classroom and import them into Gradebook with relative ease. Multiple choice, numeric, and choose from a list type questions are the easiest responses for the Google Forms grader to mark. Even changing short answer questions to choose from a list of words will make marking the exam much easier. That's because the grader feature in Google Forms cannot differentiate from answer, answer with a capital A, or answer with a space after it, or any other permutation of the correct answer. Therefore, you will have to manually go into the Google form and correct whatever the grader misses, taking up more time. Furthermore, if open-ended short answer questions are not recommended, paragraph questions should be all out avoided. There are many horror stories that I've heard from teachers and students who did not click the submit button at the end of an essay assignment in a Google form or lost internet connection temporarily, effectively losing all their work. Stick with Google Docs for those long format assessments. Fundamentally, the goal is to limit what the student can choose so that there are less errors for you to correct later, which leads us to tip number 2. Use response validation where possible and make each question required. This feature is found in the short answer question and tests that the student entry fits certain parameters. The simplest is to ensure that a number is entered, not text. The number can be greater than, less than, or in between values. It could even just check if the value is a number. Text validation is probably the least useful for an exam because it tests for specific words, an email address, or even a URL. One application is to have a password at the beginning of your Google form that is released at a specific time. You will have to create a section for this password, which is shown later on in the video. The length gives a minimum or maximum character count. Note, this is not word count, but character count. You can use Google's answer that the average word length is 5 characters long to approximate word count if you want. The last option is regular expression, which checks if the entry matches a certain formula. It's most likely not needed for most teachers, but the Google Help page linked below can get you started. Don't forget to make all of your questions required so that a student can't submit with blank answers. Tip number 3, randomize multiple choice selectors and questions. Randomizing multiple choice selectors is pretty easy. When creating a multiple choice checkboxes or drop-down question, the kebab menu has the settings to shuffle order option. To randomize question order, all questions must be in the same section. To randomize question order within a section, click on the settings gear and then the presentation tab. Click on the checkbox for shuffle question order. If you want a certain question shuffled together, like if you break your assessments up by topic, you can put them in a different section using the 2 rectangle button in the side menu to create a new section. Questions in each section will be shuffled within their respective sections. However, the order in which the sections appear will stay the same. There is currently no way of shuffling only certain sections and leaving some unshuffled. Tip number 4, text instructions, screenshots, and images are your friend. Many subjects require formulas, diagrams, or other complex images. Use your computer's screenshot tool to create images of more complex information. Simply make the formula or image in your pre-existing software and take the screen capture. You can then add them before a question, like in a diploma, and inside multiple choice or checkbox selectors. If you want to add boxes or arrows to your images, ShareX is an all-purpose screen capture recorder and image editor software I recommend. Oftentimes, I use text at the beginning of the exam so that students can read instructions before beginning the exam. Tip number 5, time limits, single submissions, and other settings. Okay, in the classroom, there's a built-in time limit, the length of the class. After giving students lots of warnings, you can release the Google form or its password at a specific time and then close the form after a set amount of time. There's no automatic way of closing the form. When the amount of time elapses, go to the Responses tab and turn off Accepting Responses at the top. Be aware that any student currently taking the exam will no longer be able to complete the exam. To prevent students from submitting an exam multiple times, click on the Settings gear and check the Limit to 1 Response setting. Another setting I often change is in the Quizzes tab, where I change the release grade to later after manual review in case there needs to be changes to the marks afterwards. I also never send out the missed questions or correct answers because then the students will have the answers in an email indefinitely. If you're teaching high school and want even more security, you can pair the exam time with a Google Meet. Share the link to the form in the Google Meet chat and take attendance of the chat. Have the students turn on their webcams so that you can monitor them during the exam if your division allows your students to turn on their webcams. There you have it. There's 5 tips to help avoid pitfalls while assessing online. You may have noticed that this quiz is not a how to create a Google Classroom quiz. There are so many resources already made, such as my book, Teaching with Google Classroom, where you can get step-by-step instructions and a straightforward overview of Google Classroom. Or there's the website Control-Alt-Achieve by another fellow Google trainer who has lots of online resources on the topic. Links for both are found in the description below. With that, stay awesome, persevere, treat yourself, and always smooth that learning curve. Thanks.